Okay, so thank you, Dara. Thank you, EuroSTAR. Welcome to this presentation on recording your story. Special topics on note taking for software testing. So, I'm Shmuel Gershon, and we are here all testers. So I believe the best way for you to understand what I am and everything about me is by some indicators plus some graphs. So as you can see here, I have over 300 friends on Facebook, and I have a very steady growth of connections in LinkedIn. Though I do have a diversifying strategy, and I cultivate my network across very different mediums. Now you can see on the bars that some of the things I do I'm successful, though some of them fail. And what? Uh-huh. Okay, so Dara from your side is just telling me that this slide is not useful at all. Like he said that no one can know important things about me from here, which is weird. Like there's so much data, yet so little information here. So thank you for the remark, Dara. Let's start again from scratch, okay? So my name is Shmuel Gershon. I have over 34 years of life experience. I've been a programmer for 5 years, and for the last 8 years I've been a tester. And I work with software and people on most of my waking up hours and some of my sleeping hours as well. My family is awesome, and I'm a certified best dad in the world for being one of the few adults who can ride a caster board. I try to learn and specialize in exploratory testing, and part of it has been specializing in note taking. So together with that, I wrote the tool that you can see on screen called Rapid Reporter, which is a tool that's completely focused on how to take notes and what's a good note to take. So this has helped me come up with a few principles, which is what we'll see on this presentation now. So, well, I guess that was much better. That's so. If we can learn from this example that we have now, if in every other aspect of life to explain something you need a story, then that happens to in our work with software, right? And if you need to tell to your manager or to anyone else what's the deal with the project that you're working on, then you need to tell a story on it. And for that, you need good notes. Moreover, like not only for the reason of providing you with the necessary information and tools to tell a story, the notes change the entire way you work on testing and the entire way you communicate. Right? It will, for example, change how you deal with this question of what have you done today. Like many people dread when this happens. Big boss comes by you and asks, "Okay, Jim, what have you done today?" And sometimes people just mumble something, oh, 60%, 70%, things like that. Now, on my case, and in the case of other people who take notes, we can't wait to be asked this question, right? We are just waiting. When will he ask this? And by the time the big boss comes and asks me this question, what have you done today? Then my answer there is, please have a seat. I have a story to tell you. And I can then start explaining everything of what I have done, the problems that we have seen, the issues, the bugs, the important things that he may be concerned about. And with time, people get used to, and people start to appreciate that. And I believe by now, when the managers comes to ask me a question, they already expect that it will take more than a few seconds. Okay, it will take a story to get that. So, okay, so let's start talking about notes. Okay, so let's first we have a word from the conference chair of EuroSTAR, Michael Bolton. A few weeks ago, wrote this on Twitter, where he was commenting that the focus on test cases and the absence of focus on good note taking is like a pandemic disease in testing. And he's sad to observe that. Right? Uh, and I agree with him, and that's why we are having this webinar here. But we need to start from asking, why is it so important to take notes? Right? What do we gain from them? What's the benefit on having these notes? So I believe first, the most important thing about notes, even before you come to tell the story through the notes, is that they are good towards you, towards the person writing these notes. Notes, while you take them, are tools for self-awareness. You know what you're doing and you know why you are doing this. So if you are testing something and you are taking notes as you test, everything you do, everything you think goes in the notes, then the notes, they help you understand what you're doing, they help you understand why you're doing, they help you remember what have you been done and where do you intend to go. You can see on many, especially of the old chess championships, that players used to take notes. Now, not every championship allows that, but and the notes keep you focused on what you're doing, and they keep you. And this is a very key concept. They keep you intentional, right? Whatever thing you are doing gets a reason, even if for a while you went into different tangents and did something that was not related to what you were supposed to do. Once they are in the notes, now they have a reason to be. Right? Suddenly they are useful because they are part of your report. So, so that's a very interesting thing that notes do with the actions that you take. But second is that the notes will also be good towards others, right? Outwards. So just like the example that you saw, remember when you talked about me, like you can have a lot of data without information, or you can have a story to tell, which is information, even though it may have data that is hidden inside the story. Just like when you think about your appliances or a microwave, and if you ask your friend, how do you like your microwave? Then he will tell you a story how at the beginning it was hard to get used to the button, but after a few days he managed, and it took him a while to configure the hour, and so it stopped blinking at the 12. Uh, and he will not tell you a lot of statistics. Oh yeah, I have 7 bugs on it. He will tell you a story, and that's what we want to do with our information about the software. We'll back everything up with bugs and and all these types of deliverables that we give to. But when we talk about status, when we talk about feeling, then it's all a story. Now the interesting thing is that notes not only allow that, notes they are entirely tied to this type of activity. Notes are intrinsically communicative. Right? Our ancestors, they painted on caves, and the reason they painted it's because they wanted to show or tell to someone else that there are bisons there, or it rained the other day, and it doesn't matter if it was a person from the tribe or of the shaman. The notes were painted on, so the rest of the public could see that. Right? So we can even say that the bison drawings were the first posted, so they were posted in the wall so the other people could see that. Moreover, the notes, they are not only intrinsically communicative, they are intrinsically reviewable. Right? There is even one theory, if I am not mistaken, I saw that on the book The Miraculous Birth of Language, that says that languages evolves to a sophisticated point because these paintings that were done on the caves or the walls, they required criticism. People they needed to tell one another, no, that's not right anymore, or you lie, the bisons were in the other side of the river. We didn't need sophisticated language to hunt, gather, or to mate, but we needed a sophisticated language to argue. So not only intrinsically communicative, but intrinsically reviewable. Like every note you write and you present, it can receive instant feedback immediately. So that's awesome, right? Good thing that we have this webinar that teaches good note taking. Well, that teaching part is tricky. Note taking is a translation of your very own thinking process. So, like Michael wrote on a following tweet, it's hard to teach. It's something that you learn, not something that you teach on. I can talk about it for hours in this webinar, but you'll only learn it by trying and by practicing yourself. It's like whistling. I can keep telling you, oh, it's like this. Do, do. But if you don't try by yourself and you don't keep practicing at the beginning, you'll just be blowing out air without a sound. You will not learn. Only after you discover how your tongue needs to be and what kind of muscles you need to move, you start whistling. And same thing happens with note taking. So it's something that everyone needs to learn by himself through practice. But luckily, there are some tricks that help us learn by ourselves. Right? So feedback, either from other people or from ourselves, on what we have been doing and how it looks like. Some judgment of the results. It helps. And practice, a lot of practice help. Once you start getting conscious about what you're doing and start to observe the results of what you do, if you do it often enough, then it gets self-calibrating, and you improve on this practice. This consciousness reminds me a story. I was once in a weekend tester session, and I was working with a friend called Adam Uret, and he was training his attention to detail. So he started to describe the window of the software under test, which was in fact Rapid Reporter, and he said, well, I see a rectangle with round corners, and I mentioned, oh, that's a button. And he said, no, I'm still describing what I see. I don't know what it is yet. And that was very interesting, like this being so deliberate into what you're doing at a point in time. And I'm saying, okay, by now I am taking notes of questions or taking this type of notes or something, and it makes you pay attention to how you do things, and it helps you get better. One of the problems, though, with learning to take notes is that we all know how to take notes. Like, we've been taking notes for long. Well, maybe taking notes for 30, 40 years, maybe more, depending on who you are. And we may have trained ourselves wrong. Perhaps, for example, the school has conditioned us to take notes only of what we are told to take notes, and not to take notes about things that we think. Or on school or at work, we may have trained ourselves to avoid writing things that we are unsure about, or things that may be wrong. So with time, all this training that happened without us noticing, like making our note-taking to be less and less valuable, it's hard to change. Right? How do you solve a problem where you have gained this habit after dozens of years of wrong practice? So how to fix that? One way is by going back to basics. Like, it's starting slow, because there is much to fix. So you start slow, baby steps, doing the basics things first, and working on a safe environment. You don't want to get stuck in your note-taking on your work because you want to have all of them done in the new way you're learning now. So, for example, a related story is that I developed a lump in my vocal cords for not breathing correctly while I spoke, apparently. So I'm doing now speech therapy. And so it's interesting because now on speech therapy, I need to say pa, pa, while I breathe correctly. Now I have a 10 months old out there that, and while she's on her room saying pa, 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 I am in my own room saying pa, pa. So both of us are learning to speak more or less at the same point, even though I know some things that she doesn't. So I am going back to basics. But I do this training on safe hours and safe locations. I do not stop the way I speak at work just so it gets improved. I know that I'm getting improved on my day to day life more and more because on my practice that is on specific times and deliberate, I am learning how to do it better. Right? So it's back to basics, and you take a few minutes at a time in a safe environment. You can do that on a day that is less stressful at work, or you can do that on a weekend testing session, or you can do that by yourself at home. You don't let that stop you from keep doing the same work, at least in the same good way you've been doing until now. So we've seen how notes and why notes are important, and how to learn their art. But so let's get more practical now. Okay, so in fact, now you are practicing and you know the time that you want to practice and you know what type of notes you want to take, right? Perhaps you even have some examples. Let's talk about substance. What do you put inside? And which notes do you want to take when you are testing? So I like the nuance of this book, Note Taking Made Easy by Kesselman, Turkel, and Peterson, where they say, well, you take notes of things that are noteworthy or notable, right? Things that you consider important. And they may be important because they are very significant, or they may be important because you don't want to forget, or just because they have a relationship to something else, right? There is no clear-cut rule on what's important. Your mind and your context will dictate that to you. But while you're testing, what to write inside? So you need to write things that are related to your tests and related to the conversations that you will have after the test. So you take note of what you did and what you tried, which of the trials went better than the others. If you had questions or problems, you want to take notes of things that you have assumed, and you want to take notes of the feelings that you have. Okay, this part of the program makes me happy, that part makes me sad. And this if you take note of all these, it creates, or it can create, a stream where your consciousness is being translated into paper or into computer, depending on the tool you're using. You don't let yourself get stuck on some writer's block. This is a suggestion by Brenda Miller Power in the Taking Notes book. This is a book that she wrote for teachers. So none of these books are for testers. I should say, give yourself permission to write freely. If you don't know what to write, then you just start a phrase. I see, and then you force yourself to write. What do I see? I see a menu. In this menu, I have three options. On the second option, it looks different. Let's understand why it's different. Right? So it helps you even if you're stuck on testing. The testing helps your notes, and your note helps your testing. And that's one reason why you want to take notes as you go in your tests, as opposed in many people, your mileage will vary. That's the way I work, at least. I take notes as I go, as opposed to taking notes after I've tested, or only when I find a problem. I've experimented with both, with myself and other testers that I've worked with. And the problem with taking notes only when you have a significant event, or after you have done your testing session, is that by then you put into your notes only your focusing times, because the focusing areas, they are well remembered. So if you are testing and suddenly you see a bug and now you want to take notes, you will only write the things that look very, very related to the bug, because the bug is a very focusing event, of a big focusing situation. But if you were taking notes all the way up to the bug, you may have notes that are not relevant to the bug, but are still important to have in your report, are still important to tell your story or to ask your questions. And the same happens if you wait after the session to write the notes. Now you try to remember what happens in the last hour, and only the locations where you were excited, mostly due to their focusing nature, is what you'll remember to write. I've seen good testers like Ricard, which is also part of the chairing committee on EuroSTAR, who defend also taking notes after that. You can choose which way works better for you. But I would beware a bit of whether you are missing defocusing times when you take notes after the fact. So these are the things you want to put inside. You don't need perfect notes. You of course don't want notes that are lacking. You try to make them adequate. Right? You have to think, what will I do with these notes? Will I show them to my manager? If you think about this objective, then you put some things inside. If you think, oh, that's only for me, I'll put it in the drawer, then you put some other things inside. The purpose of them will guide you to decide what's noteworthy and what's notable. Once you have decided that there is something important to put into notes, it helps if you understand where do this note happens in the time. You have some notes that are related to the past. Oh, this is what I did. Look at this screenshot that happened. Look at this bug that just happened a few minutes ago, or that just happened now. Right? These are things that are related to the past. It's a historical evidence of an account of what happened during your tests. Now, sometimes you write things that are relevant to the future. Okay. Oh, I have a question that I want to ask as soon as this session is over. Or I saw a new area on my software. Look at this other toolbar. These we need to test in the next session. So these are notes that are related to the future. And there are notes that are certainly no less important, that are related to the present. These are the notes that build together with you your line of thoughts. Oh, I am doing this, I am trying this thing. What if I press the button while the file is deleted? So these are things that are happening now, and they help you think. They help you prepare for the things that are coming. And very similar to what we said a few slides ago, it not only records the path you are doing to get to an objective or to an aim, it also records and gives aim to some aimlessness. So if you got lost for a while, because you had your notes, now this getting lost is part of the past that you did. Right? So it's not aimlessness anymore. It makes it happens together with all the rest of the session. So all these off-charters things, all these intuitions that you try to get, even if they get to a dead end, they suddenly receive a reason to be together with the rest of your session. And if you already decided that you need to take note of something, thinking about where it happens in time, if it's an account of the past, a wish for the future, or a record of the present, will help you phrase it, will help you decide how do you write this note in the text. So another practical part is my, let's call it the Shmuel Gershon principles of note-taking. Very short points that from the notes that I've been studying, from testing and from other sources, can make simple suggestions that can make your notes very powerful. First is to have complete phrases. So when you write a note, the note includes subject, verb, adjective. It's an entire phrase written in good English or whatever language you are working on. So it doesn't get to this situation where you can see here, and it happens to me quite a lot, that I write something in a napkin and then I have to see and I look at it, and you have this number that you don't know if it's someone that you need to call or it's someone that called you, or if this is your napkin anyway. You're not sure what to do with that. And some notes that we take on tests happen like this. So it happens that I would review a session that someone did on testing, and there is a note saying file menu. And by the time the person is reviewing that with me, he cannot remember what's this file menu. Is this was there a bug in the file menu, or maybe he was just noting that I need to ask from a different tester to test the file menu in the future, and perhaps the person thinks immediately that he will remember, but a few hours later you have no idea what this file menu means. On the other hand, you don't want to have phrases that are too long or entire paragraphs. You need one-liners. For example, you see this in this other text in the slide that it has a number somewhere there in the middle, 5800 something. But if you are reviewing this on someone, it takes you a lot of minutes just to get to the number. Right? So you need complete phrases, but all your notes should be one-liners. I did this and looking for that thing. I wondered what happened if I pressed this other button, and that's the entire note. If there's a continuation, it may be a second note. Because notes that are one-liner, they are very, very easy to skim and you can run through them with your eyes very quickly, and they are easy for other people to review. And if they see, oh, that this part is not so relevant to what I'm looking for, they can skip quickly to the next one. So complete phrases, one-liners, and they are intentional. It's very hard to write a note that is not intentional, though it's very easy to test without being intentional if you don't take notes. And the other principle is that the notes be self-organizing or self-classifying. Okay. That's what you would do, for example, when you take post-its, color-coded post-its, and you put on somewhere. So you saw that the same notes that a minute ago were messy, now that we have yellow and red and blue marks around them, they suddenly look very organized. It's easy to find things on them. Right? So Brenda Miller Power, she suggests that when a teacher takes notes, then every note needs to be accompanied by a sign that classifies whether it's a part related to the content class or related to a student assessment, or if it's an important thing that she needs to look at. Rapid Reporter has self-classifying notes where every note it has a tag or a note type called a setup note, test, a bug, a question, a future session thing. In fact, all of these principles, they are ingrained in the way Rapid Reporter works because I had some of them before writing Rapid Reporter, and B, Rapid Reporter helped me see the strength in some of the other principles. As it's the theory helping the tool and the tool helping the theory. And in the examples that you will see later on, you will notice that these principles happen for good testers and for good journalists or people from other professions that didn't need to take notes for their work on their life. So let's talk about tools, right? We already know why notes are important, and we know that learning is an individual effort that each one of us needs to do by himself. And we even know how to choose which notes to put and how to write them. And so in which tool would you write? How important is it to think about the tools? And let me tell you that I walk around with a myriad of ways to take notes. So I have my physical pocket notebook on my pocket whenever it fits there, and a pen, and I just write things in the middle of lunch or while I'm walking to the bus. I take a lot of notes in my computer on Rapid Reporter Notepad. I use OneNote, and I send reminders to myself on my email. I use my blog on my blog draft to have notes. I have a digital pen Pulse which works very well, but I don't take much notes on them because it's a complex tool to take notes. And I use post-its and napkins. It's funny that with all this technology and stuff, I still walk with napkins around, and that. So there are many ways to take notes. It's important to keep in mind that the tool is not the master of your note. Right? It's the way or the amount of good that you are taking your notes. It was what will dictate if the notes are good or not. So we could say that it doesn't matter which tool you're taking, as long as you're intentional and you're following some easy principles to take good notes. But I have to warn that a bad tool or a complex tool can hinder you and hinder your progress, can work as an anchor that will make you take uh, uh, some weaker notes. Perhaps we need to take into mind that if the notes are hard to take, then one does not take good notes. I saw that happening with my teams. Persons who were at a presentation about the origins of Rapid Report remembers that that's how it happened. The other tools were just too much thinking to do while you take the notes. So you write your notes very quickly and you don't write as much notes. So what's a good tool? A good tool should help you make sense of the note you're taking, and should let you write one note and then the other, or write your note and then go to test. Right? It doesn't stop you, and keeps you in control of the session, and it doesn't hold you back. You shouldn't feel that, oh, now I have this tool. It is like it's anchoring you. Complex tool, they have exactly this problem. Sometimes by the time they're ready, it's too late. That's why I don't use my Pulse pen, digital pen, so much. Because by the time I take it out and I press the on button and it turns on, if it has battery, then I'm already talking about a second topic. The normal pen that I have in my pocket is just much faster than that. So tools that make it hard to take, if you need many clicks to take a note, or if the pen that you're writing on paper is not so comfortable, then you don't take notes. We'll just skip them unconsciously. So you want to make it easy for your mind to think about the notes. And for that, you should use the best tool that you will feel best. So some people write good notes on pen and paper, though they have the problem of not being digital, so they are harder to organize. I use Rapid Reporter, but I also use Notepad and OneNote. It's hopefully during your practice you'll discover which of the tools are better for your note taking. And if we were already talking about notes, then about tools, sorry. Then why we really need a tool where we write our notes, right? We are in the digital age. Can't we just record everything? Right? That's what other tools that claim to be exploratory testing tools do, right? From different companies. They just record whatever is happening on the computer. You don't need to take any notes there. Now, I have tried a lot of this, and I did the testing sessions with recorders. I don't agree that they are useful, maybe at all. I do agree with what Kasem, Tarkal, and Peterson say in the Note-Taking Made Easy tool. We can't understand why students take lectures. They're not only unreliable, they're a waste of time. Now you need to listen to your recording, or you need to look at the video of the screen again, and start to deciding again what's important and what's noteworthy. Right? You were already doing that while you tested. Why you want to do it again? And if someone else needs to review that, this person was not in the session with you. How will he know what's noteworthy or notable? Okay? A very important quote. This is by Don Fry, the guy that you see on the top there. Don Fry he coaches journalists and writers in writing, and he has a 30 years war against tape recorders for journalists, right? Where they go to an interview or to take sources for an article, and they record the source or they record the interview. And he adamantly says that these tape recorders are dangerous. Like, taping encourages lazy note taking. Why? Before you're thinking, yeah, I don't need to take note of this now because it's recorded. And therefore, lazy listening. If you're not paying a lot of attention because you want to put that into writing by yourself, right? Then you're taking lazy notes, and you're also listening in a lazy way. So you don't notice everything that's happening on the software. Right? More than that, And we can see that on the yellow part on the right. Right? All the tools that say, oh, we are an exploratory testing tool, and we record the screen, they miss the important part. The important thing for the session is not what you did or what the computer did, is what you thought, right? The things that were going in your mind. And there's no tool that can take that into account. Donald Knapp has these beautiful essays on literate programming, on how to write programs that include all the knowledge inside them, either in good comments or some techniques that he defends. And Wikipedia has this interesting quote where automatic notes tools that read the code and generate knowledge, they're not useful to be called literate programming because they miss the web of abstract concepts that is in the mind of the programmer. Right? So if they let a tool do that, you miss everything that the programmer was thinking behind his code. And the same happened for you. If you only see what the tester was doing, you still don't know what the tester was thinking. And this is something that can happen only when you take notes. Right? So you don't miss this very important part of testing. Right? And now some people will say, yeah, well, I want to record everything because what if I don't write something that's important? Well, there is this fear of missing out that happens. I don't think it's justifiable. Right? It's more important that you pay attention and you know that whatever you did took note is relevant than the fear of then recording everything that is irrelevant just because there may be something relevant there that now will be much harder to track. So maybe taking notes is just you have to see if it. Sorry, maybe recording may just be an excuse for being lazy. So you have to be honest with yourself. Though I need to bring this into account. Michael Bolton once said that Rapid Reporter is like a pilot's log, but you still can have BB Test Assistant to act like the flight data recorder. So if you are recording, but you manage to forget that you're recording it, so you still take good notes, then it may be a positive way to work. So let's see some examples. The first examples that I'll bring is from people that take a lot of notes, but they are not testers. Well, they are testers of reality. They are not always testing software, which are journalists. And I found during my research a few examples. I have these two here, which are interesting. The first one is from Hunter Thompson on his classic article, "The Kentucky Derby is Decadent and Depraved," where in the middle of the article suddenly he puts in the text his notes, right? And he says, taken as a whole with sporadic memory flashes because he was hungover, the notes seem to tell the story. Rained all night until dawn. By noon the sun burns through, perfect day, not even humid. Stedman is now worried about fire. So it's funny that even though he was partying, he took the time to write complete phrases and one-liners one after the other. And the other example is also from a journalist. This is from an article by Thomas Lake in the Atlanta magazine. The interesting thing is that if you go online to the Atlanta magazine, they have a section called Reporter's Notebook for this article, where he writes. You see the notes that he took for the sources for the article. So, and I just copied some of them here, but you can see that his notes are something like that. I obtained copies of Fiamma's first divorce petition and subsequent dismissal. Or at the bottom, the Boston Globe reported on LaFrance's connection with Swindle. So, for all the sources that he took the precaution of writing complete notes that are one-liners. See, and I believe that he took them as he went, just like Hunter Thompson did. And if we go closer to our own craft, from journalists to, for example, explorers, and you look at the right, where the picture of Lewis and Clark there appears, this is an excerpt from a random journal that I open. All their travel journals are online. And they were very, very avid note takers, they would take notes every day, no matter what happened. So on the 3rd of January, 1805, then you can see suddenly these notes there. Some buffaloes came near our fort. 9 men went out, but killed none of them. One of the men killed a beautiful white hare, which is common in this country. It looks like parts of our reports. We were looking for some critical bugs, and we had a tiger team looking for them. But we only found one cosmetical bug on this and that. So, what I like about these notes and is that they are mostly they are short. They include a lot of drawings too, but they are short and they are written in complete phrases of English. What makes it possible today for us or researchers to read their notes day to day and recreate their entire trajectory across the states and what happened in each part of their travel. That we have everything because they took care of writing down whatever looked more or less important or relevant. On the left, you can see an example of another explorer, in this case, a software explorer. That's from a paper by Michael Bolton on a tester's notebook, and that's a picture from his Moleskine. And this is a session that he has on the paper where he was testing the remote control in the plane. And you can see how his notes look like. Like they are one-liners, so there's a credit card sweeping slot on the left side, and this won't test that. So, so he's taking notes of things that are important for the fact of not being done now, right? If how would you do that automatically, right? If you record what you did, how do you know what you decided not to do? And you can see some of the bugs that he wrote, like the what's on screen is much more blurry than the rest of the on-screen display. Right. So, and you can see here that the notes, first they also have nice drawings or pictures or evidence, but the notes, they have these features of being one-liners. You can understand them by themselves. You don't need the rest of the lines to understand each one of them. And they are written in complete English. And because they are written by a person, they are intentional. And to finish, I'll show you another note. So this is what you see on screen. It's part of the report made by Rapid Reporter. And you may just be able to open perhaps it on a real web browser and see it better. Yeah. So here you can see this is maybe a digital version of the Moleskine here. This is a session that I did for a friend that wrote the users box webpage. It's a page to create and manage personas for software. So you can see that I have notes and none of them is too long. None of them here is too short to the point of not being an English phrase. We were working remotely, so I tested these and sent him the notes over email so he could understand. So he needed to understand whatever I was writing here. And then you can see I have both things that are bugs. Okay, oh, there's a bug, a picture is missing. Two things that are just a feeling, like Julia, the help that appears on every page is useful. So thanks. So I have things that are on the feeling, and these notes they take if they are evidence they will have this the screenshots with them, and again they happen on the computer. The extension, but only things that the tester decided. In this case, it was me. Only things that the tester decided will go to the notes. And it's self-classifying. You see that every note gets a test note question bug tag to it. And if you follow the other principles of writing complete phrases that are one-liners, then you may end up with a report that is not only helpful for you, but also very clear for others. So on this webinar, what we saw is why taking notes is important, how to learn note-taking, what are the principles and ideas of content and organization of notes, and how to think about the note-taking tools, and why recording may be dangerous, why Rapid Reporter follows good the principles that I presented here, and some examples of other professional note takers that more or less show that these principles can be useful if they fit your style. So thank you for this time of listening. That thank you for EuroSTAR for providing this opportunity. And if you have any questions, you can send them over through the EuroSTAR blog or directly to me on my website or on my email. Thanks a lot.